Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
To start by thanking all colleagues and indeed thousands of Canadians for their warm wishes and prayers to my wife Rebecca and I as we recovered from COVID-19. Thank you, Canada. You can clap for that. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's record when it comes to reconciliation is the same as his record in general. All talk and no action. Big announcements, zero follow-through. Indigenous communities need the Prime Minister to roll up his sleeves and get down to work. Can the Prime Minister advise this House why the government has not yet delivered its measurable goals called for in the 19th call to action as part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report?
Prime Minister.
We will have many opportunities for questions and answers, but I too want to begin by wishing the Leader of the Opposition welcome back to this House after the health scare he had, but seeing him in good health, seeing the Leader of the Bloc Québécois back in the House as well is a good thing. We all want good health for everyone. I look forward to exchanging, particularly on the topic of reconciliation. I think there's an awful lot we need to do across party lines on that, whether it's passing UNDRIP legislation, whether it's concretely delivering for Indigenous communities across the country. And I'm very encouraged to see the Conservatives lead off with a very important question.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'll be very encouraged with an eventual answer. Monsieur le Président, le bilan.
Mr. Speaker, this government's record when it comes to reconciliation is the same as all the rest. Great promises, like always, but no action. Indigenous communities need the Prime Minister to start to work. Why no action on the recommendations with regard to health in the from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'm very encouraged to see the Conservatives take interest in our relationship with the Indigenous communities and peoples. We have been working on this for the past 5 years. We are delivering by eliminating long-term boil advisories. We are delivering on new schools, new healthcare centres. We are delivering on new treaties and agreements. And when it comes to health, we have committed to putting forward legislation for Indigenous health care, and we hope we'll be able to work with the Conservative Party on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
The United States has been approving rapid testing for months. The European Union has been approving them since spring. Our European trade agreement actually requires us to deem the processes for medical investigation to be equivalent to the EU. But Germany, Italy, and the UK have been having tests for months while Canadians wait hours in line. When are Canadians finally going to receive rapid testing?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, from the very beginning of this crisis, we've worked with provinces and territories to enhance testing capacity. We've given more funds and resources to Health Canada to approve the new technologies coming on the market. Indeed, yesterday, Minister of Public Services and Procurement and the Minister of Health announced the purchase of 7.9 million rapid point-of-care tests from Abbott Rapid Diagnostics, pending Health Canada approval. Well, this afternoon, Health Canada authorized that Abbott ID. We can now be deployed for provinces and territories with deliveries coming in the coming weeks, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I guess, Mr. Speaker, where there's a will, there actually is a way. CETA is Canadian law, and it has been for 3 years, Mr. Speaker. We've recognized Italian, German, and British health product regulators as equivalent to Health Canada for 3 years. But thanks to the government, all of these countries and their citizens get access to rapid testing, and we do not. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister liked to say Canada is back. Why is he sending Canadians to the back of the line by not adhering to the CETA provisions to accept European rapid testing?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we've worked with all provincial authorities, all Health Canada experts, to ensure that the products we're approving here in Canada are done quickly, but are also safe for Canadians. We saw examples in the spring of approvals given that then had to be rescinded. We need to make sure that every step of the way we're putting the health of Canadians at the forefront. We will continue to work with partners around the world as we deliver the products and the technologies for Canadians that they need. Every step of the way, we promise to have Canadians back. We will continue to have Canadians back.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, on May 22nd, the Prime Minister said that rapid tests were necessary in order to keep businesses and schools open during a second wave. And now it's September 30th, and rapid tests are not yet available. Businesses need to close in Montreal. When will the Prime Minister take action to have rapid tests available for all Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to confirm that yesterday the Minister of Health and Public Services announced 7.9 million rapid tests purchased to come to Canada. Once approved by Health Canada, these tests are being approved today by Health Canada, and we will be able to share these tests with Canadians in the coming weeks. At each stage, we have respected science, listened to experts, and put politics aside. We will do everything necessary to protect Canadians. The Honourable Member for Belarus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I may congratulate the new leader of the official opposition, I wish you to be as good for Canada as the Bloc is for Quebec. A question for the Prime Minister. I've lost. I'm out of the habit with the interpretation being later. It's not what we know how to do, but what we can do and what we can do well. But we're also talking about jurisdiction. Healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction. Is the Prime Minister aware that healthcare is a provincial and Quebec jurisdiction? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, at each stage in this pandemic, we have worked with the provinces and territories. We have done this to protect Canadians across the country. We have been there with healthcare transfers starting in the beginning of the pandemic of $500 million to help provinces. We were there for $19 billion to help Safe Restart, which includes healthcare transfers. We were there to help in provincial jurisdictions so that people can go back to school. We will always be there in partnership to help the provinces to protect Canadians from one coast to coast. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With her last breath, Joyce Ekwes-Chewan asked for help as she was lying in a hospital bed dying. This was an Indigenous woman who died at the hospital while the hospital staff ridiculed her. I am very sorry, Joyce. The last moments of your life should not have ended like this. Systemic racism is depriving people of dignity. It's time to pass from empty promises. Will the Prime Minister commit to taking real action to deal with systemic racism? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians were shocked to see that video showing the last moments of Joyce's life. My condolences to her family and friends in the community. It was the worst form of racism when she needed the most help. This is an example, yet another example of systemic racism. It is quite simply unacceptable in Canada. A rapid investigation is essential to ensure if it was more than just simple racist words. We urge Quebec to take quick action, and we will do our utmost to eliminate racism where it exists and to support people who are affected.
South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Throughout the pandemic, we've heard the very sound public health advice that we need to wash our hands. And in a second wave, this is all the more important. But for so many Indigenous communities, they don't have access to clean drinking water. They simply can't drink that water. They can't even use that water to wash their hands. Now, in the throne speech, the Liberal government mentions nothing about their 2021 deadline. There is no excuse in the time that we are, with the technology that we are, that there's no community, that every community in our country doesn't have access to clean drinking water. So will the Prime Minister commit to basic human rights and ensure that every Indigenous community in Canada has clean drinking water?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, not only do I make that commitment today, we made that commitment 5 years ago, and we acted on it. Over the past 5 years, we have eliminated over 80 long-term boil water advisories that had gone decades without having been affected, and we continue to work very hard. We recognize the May 2021 deadline is fast approaching. There have been slowdowns because of COVID, but because of that, we are redoubling our efforts to try and ensure that all Canadians have access to safe drinking water, particularly in our First Nations communities.
The Honourable
Calgary, Nose Hill.
Right now, Mr. Speaker, nobody in Canada, not a single person, has access to rapid testing, and that's a failure of this government. And today, the Prime Minister did not answer the Leader of the Opposition's question, which is the question that everyone is asking, which is when are we going to have access to this? When is it going to be deployed? When is it going to be in a long-term care facility or in a school? So to the mom who this morning had her child present with a runny nose and a sore throat and doesn't know what to do because she can't stand in line for a test, when is that test going to be available to Canadians?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Nose Hill should perhaps check with her Ontario colleagues, because they apparently got access to some private secret rapid test that Health Canada hadn't approved just months ago. Maybe she can find out why they did that particular test and what it was useful for. What I can say, and what I did say to the Leader of the Opposition, was that in the coming weeks, the Abbott ID Now rapid test will be deployed to help Canadians across the country with rapid testing, because we signed a deal with them for 7.9 million tests just yesterday.
Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
The reality is that the Prime Minister of Canada is responsible for making testing for COVID an elitist principle in Canada. That's the reality right now. People in Canada, somebody who wants to go visit their father with Alzheimer's in a long-term care facility has to go stand in line for 8 hours and then isolate for days to get their test results before they can take that compassionate step. And it's because of his failures. Yep. Why won't he answer the question? He can't answer the question. He hasn't done his job. When will these tests be in the hands of Canadians to use?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For the third time, Mr. Speaker, the Abbott ID Now test will be out in the coming weeks across the country. Health Canada has delivered on approvals in a rapid way, because that's what Canadians expect. But every step of the way, we have put science first. We've respected our scientists, we've listened to them, and we have made sure that we are protecting Canadians. And on the issue of helping the vulnerable, quite frankly, the Conservatives who keep telling everyone that we should have helped businesses first and not the most vulnerable Canadians are not anyone to give lessons on this one.
I understand the honourable members are concerned about social distancing, but shouting across is not the way to do that. So if they want to talk to someone, please go within 6 feet and talk to them at a level that would be respectable within the House.
These people are crazy. This is going to be a disaster.
strength of our healthcare system.
Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I commend the government for reimposing sanctions on Belarus, sanctions which the previous Conservative government put in place in 2006, sanctions which we've been seeking for some time, sanctions which the government lifted in 2017. Now, China is violating human rights and international treaties like the Geneva Convention in its treatment of Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, the Uyghurs, and the people of Hong Kong. Will the government now impose sanctions on those responsible in China and in Hong Kong?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, first, in regards to Belarus, we will not be silent as the government of Belarus continues to commit systematic human rights violations. That's why, in coordination with the UK and in support of the people of Belarus, we're imposing sanctions against the government of Belarus officials, including Alexander Lukashenko. In regards to China, we continue to stand up for the interests and rights of Canadians. We continue to demand the safe return of the 2 Canadians arbitrarily detained by China for political purposes. We continue to raise the plight of the Uyghurs. We continue to express concern over Hong Kong and the 300,000 Canadians there. We will continue to work with the international community on standing up strongly.
Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that answer shows the government's complete incoherence on China. In July, the foreign minister tells us he's looking at sanctions on Chinese officials. The next day, the government tells Reuters that that's off the table. 2 weeks ago, the foreign minister tells the Globe he's abandoning free trade with China. The same day, Ambassador Barton says that we should expand trade and do more in China. When will the government get its story straight and get serious? When will it start defending Canadian interests and place sanctions on those responsible in China and Hong Kong?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way this government has stood up to defend Canadian interests, whether it was canola farmers, whether it was our beef and pork producers, whether it's standing up for the 2 Michaels who've been arbitrarily detained. We will continue to work with the international community on issues around Hong Kong, issues around the Uyghurs, and continue to express our deep concern with the direction that China is taking in its international diplomacy and in its international actions. We need to stand united as a world. We will do exactly that, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable.
China Report.
Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, dairy farmers are being left behind by these Liberals. Farmers continue to wait for the Liberals to deliver on compensation for losses from trade deals, while senior Liberals, including top advisors in the PMO, are busy bending over backwards for China-owned food processors operating in Canada. In fact, the former government official who opened the door to China-owned firms is now sitting on the board of one. Smells a bit sour to me. When will this government stop catering to these well-connected insiders and start putting Canadian farm families first?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, even as we move forward to sign historic trade deals around the world with Europe, restoring NAFTA and protecting NAFTA, and moving forward with the CPTPP in Asia, we have compensated farmers for those first trade deals, and will continue to move forward and support the incredibly hardworking agricultural producers across our country. We know how important it is that they continue to be able to be supported, and we will be there as we've promised to be.
The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
The Liberals announced their so-called national housing strategy. They promised that soon after would be a strategy that would finally address the horrific housing conditions of Indigenous communities across this country. Today we are all wearing orange shirts to respect and honour the residential school survivors of our country. And here we stand in a House where the Liberals make mistakes again and again, promises again and again, and nothing ever changes. The member from Nunavut talked about houses that were described as mold boxes. Imagine during these times or any times living in a mold box. Housing is a basic human right. When is this government going to honour Indigenous communities and grant them that?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning, we have demonstrated that we understand how important it is to work in partnership with Indigenous communities and close the gaps that existed. We closed the gap on education funding. We've made serious investments in infrastructure. We made serious investments in health and in ending boil water advisories. But of course, there's much more to do. But it is, quite frankly, irresponsible of the NDP to suggest that nothing has been done over the past 5 years, because the partnership that has been established and the leadership shown by Indigenous communities across this country on making things better is not to be ignored, even by the NDP.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
Today is Orange Shirt Day, and the Anishinaabe Education Institute is selling T-shirts to raise money for the defense of the St. Anne's residential school survivors. Now, this Prime Minister doesn't need to sell T-shirts because his government has spent millions of taxpayers' dollars trying to deny them justice. Government lawyers have suppressed evidence. They've ignored court orders. They've used every possible legal tactic to deny justice and wear down the survivors. But the St. Anne's survivors are not being intimidated. It's time to do justice. When will this Prime Minister end his government's legal vendetta against the St. Anne's survivors?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 5 years, we have come to agreements worth billions of dollars with Indigenous communities, with victims of terrible moments in Canada's past, and we will continue to work to resolve both the terrible events of the past, support people today, and build a brighter future. That is a commitment we made, and that is a commitment we are holding in partnership as we move forward on this path of reconciliation. We have much more to do, and we will continue to do it in partnership, in respect, because that's what we remember today, and that's what we celebrate every day we move forward in partnership.
The hotel industry has been devastated by this pandemic. We were hit first, hit hardest, and we will be the last to recover. The limits on international and domestic travel, as well as restrictions on mass gatherings, are appropriate and necessary, but do put us on the edge of survival. Most hotels in Canada today have been operating at a revenue loss of between 70 and 90% since mid-March. If government support is not received, we will have bankruptcies and thousands of permanent job losses in the industry. According to our latest member survey, 40% have only 4 weeks left before cash runs out to cover fixed costs. We are at a crossroads. That is why our association has issued a 5-point plan to keep the hotel sector alive and transition it to recovery. A copy of this plan was circulated to members in advance of this meeting. But for the purposes of our dialogue here today, I'm going to focus on 2 key critical recommendations. 1 is liquidity that works, and 2 is increased wage subsidy support for hard-hit businesses. Our industry has been cut out of the government's loan program, BCAP. Banks are not willing to loan.